Good morning and welcome. My name is Phill, and I'm part of our pastoral team here at St. Pete's, and it is a joy to be with you. And I realize now I have a hand in one hand, or a mic in one hand, and I'm going to be a little limited, but I'll do extra hand actions to engage. As some of you know, I've been going through a process of discernment around the call to Anglican ministry for the past 2 years. And because when I was a kid, I felt a call to be a pastor, and then I ended up at St. Pete's, and I was like, there's an extra call to be Anglican, and that I've been discerning and processing through for a number of years. And along this way, I have to admit, there's been worries and doubts from me because I grew up Baptist, and then I would have described myself as very non-denominational before coming to St. Pete's. And so I've been walking through this journey as Anglican ministry, what I've been called to. And along the way, I've felt kind of nudges or maybe breadcrumb trails from God or maybe assurances that this is an okay path to take, where I kept being like, well, I'm not sure if I agree with this, and there'd be some sort of thing that would happen that would give me a little bit of reassurance. It's okay to be Anglican. And I'm sure many of us here at St. Pete's have felt that same journey in a bit of different ways, but especially around my call toward ministry. I was like, is this the denomination I'm to go in? But I bring this up because today we're preaching on the story of Jacob's staircase and this calling of Nathaniel. And 2 years ago, I preached a sermon on Jacob's staircase because our church was going through a challenging time, and I wanted to offer us comfort and kind of invitation from God. And I was studying Jacob's staircase, and along the way, I found this incredible connection to the Gospel of John and to something Jesus says. And I was so excited. I thought I discovered something new. And then this past week, as I began prepping for this sermon, I opened up the lectionary, and lo and behold, the Anglicans have been doing it for hundreds of years. I thought I discovered something new, but it turns out this has been in the Book of Common Prayer for hundreds of years. And I felt this kind of confidence, this assurance, and maybe a whisper from God saying, maybe you're more Anglican than you think, Phill. So we're back, and actually I've preached on this a number of times in summer camps and here at St. Pete's, and so it's wonderful to return to something that's familiar, but hopefully that we can look with new eyes once again. And this morning what I want to do is I want to look at the character of Jacob and ask a question, why is he the one that gets to have this incredible vision? I want to look at this dream that he has and look at what it means and wrestle with the implications of his dream. And then I want to look at Jesus and how he fulfills this dream that Jacob has in such an incredible way. And then finally we'll end with reflecting on what this means for us as individuals and as a church. So let me pray and we'll dive in. Father God, you are here. Your Spirit is with us, often unseen, and we ask that we have eyes like Jacob to wake up and exclaim, surely the Lord is here and I didn't even know it. Give us ears to listen and eyes to see, and plant this seed of the gospel in us that will grow up into a light in the city. In your name, amen. So let's begin by looking at a rather rapscallion of a man, Jacob. Jacob is the son of Isaac, who is the son of Abraham, which in a way means he's the son of promise, because Abraham and Isaac had both received promises from God that they would bear many descendants. And so Jacob is a fulfillment of this. But he's also the younger son of Isaac. He's a twin brother to Esau. And the very first time we meet Jacob and Esau is during their birth. And Esau is described as hairy and red, and Jacob is described as the one who grasps. So they take Esau out, they look at him, they say, you're hairy, your name is Esau, and while they're pulling Esau out, they see a hand is grasped around his ankle. And so they describe him as Jacob, the one who grasps. And the biblical writers are being clever. They're getting us to see what Jacob's story will be. Because for the rest of Jacob's life, we see him always grasping, pulling, trying to take what's not his. One of the best stories, Esau, the one who is hairy, is out hunting, and then he comes home, and Jacob is making a stew, and Esau says to him, give me the stew or I'm going to die. And Jacob, the trickster, says, give me your birthright. And so Esau foolishly sells his birthright to Jacob. Then years later, Jacob and Esau's father, Isaac, is going to die. He's blind, he's aging, and he wants to give his deathbed blessing to Esau. But Jacob, once again, the one who grasps, wants to take it for himself. So he covers his arms in sheepskin and his neck. And then when he comes to his father says, You don't sound like Esau, but you feel and smell like him, which is just the best description of a biblical character. Esau smells and feels like a sheep. So then Isaac unknowingly gives his deathbed blessing to Jacob. And this is what is kind of the prelude to the story we're in, because then Esau finds out that Jacob has taken his deathbed blessing, and he says to Jacob, when we're done, or when our father is dead and I'm done mourning, I'm going to kill you. Very ominous thing to say to your brother. So Jacob flees. He runs off, escaping from Esau with his life. The one who grasped has taken too many times, and now it is coming back upon him. And so Jacob is running away. And this is where our passage picks up in Genesis 28, verse 11. It says this: when he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones, he put it under his head and laid down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on earth with its top ascending to heaven, and angels of God were ascending and descending on it, and there above it stood the Lord. Let's pause and reflect for a moment, because this gives us such an interesting idea of the kind of people God picks. God often chooses people who aren't looking. Jacob is not on a pilgrimage. He's not on a silent retreat. He's not praying to God. He's not doing some heart and soul search. He's not doing good deeds. He's not even a good person. He's not someone to be admired. He's running for his life for being a liar, a cheater, and a thief. He lied to his blind and dying father. He stole from his brother again and again. And now he's sleeping on the side of the road with a rock for a pillow because he's completely unprepared. And then God shows up. And he gives Jacob a vision, a dream that is a restorative dream, you could say. And I want to pause and name something for a moment that some of us might feel when we hear this story, because there's something frustrating and something life-giving. Many of us have been either explicitly or implicitly told that if we do the right things, say the right things, pray the right prayers, God will show up. And yet, this story is not the case. Jacob is not looking for God. And in fact, in all of Jacob's life, God is not mentioned until after this dream. And then God shows up to this guy. And I don't know about you, but I get a little bit frustrated at times because I'm like, I've done all the right things. I've said the right prayers. I'm becoming Anglican. Why hasn't God shown up in this way? And the good news is that we're probably worse than we often think, and we know that in our hearts. So when we hear that this lying, cheating swindler receives a vision from God, we kind of think to ourselves, maybe there's hope for me too then. So there's frustration and hope at the same time. God gives visions to people even like Jacob, which is probably more similar to you and I than we often like to admit. So are you trying to get God to notice you? Are you trying to say the right prayers so God will give you his attention? You don't need to do those just to get God's attention. He's already given it to you. We do it in response to the attention he's given. So that's the kind of people that God chooses to pick over and over again in the book of Genesis. Lying, cheating, swindlers. And then let's look at the dream and this promise that God gives Jacob. Because I would say this is a dream that is going to set Jacob on a path of restoration. And it's this life-changing moment for him, but also hopefully for us. So for Jacob, he has this dream. He's laying, and I love the one thing it says, the sun had set. And whenever you kind of see a physical description, especially in Genesis, you want to look at the character who's around, because it's also saying something about what's going on inside them. The outside is reflective of what's going on inside Jacob's life. The sun has set on him, he feels. And then in this moment, a staircase descends from heaven and sits on earth. Now, one of the things that's important to remember is in a Jewish ancient cosmology, heaven was not the place where we go when we die. Heaven was the place where God is, the place of spiritual beings. And it is the place above the earth, but separated from it. And Jacob has this moment where there is a bridge between heaven and earth, a staircase connecting two far-off places. And Jacob is learning God is not removed from here. God is not separated from here. Messengers are going back and forth, and God is present over all creation. And this is such an important thing because this is actually the first time we see God so imminently present in the story of Genesis. Adam and Eve were sent out from the garden. He shows up to Abraham in an amazing way. But here we're seeing the imminence of heaven on earth, the imminence of a place coming down. And so Jacob experiences this reality-shifting moment. God is not far off. And it's so important that we have this story in the book of Genesis because in the early church, one of the biggest heresies that came out in the first 100 years was a heresy we call deism, which is the belief that God created everything and then left. And yet this story is a reminder God is here. And Jacob wakes up with the best words, "Surely the Lord was here, and I wasn't even aware of it." Reality, nature, creation is enamored with God's presence speaking to him. And then comes the promises. And there's 3 promises that Jacob receives. First, like his fathers Abraham and Isaac, God will give him descendants and a land. And that promise is repeated again and again. But the second promise is so important to listen in on. It says this, his descendants will spread out and be scattered like dust to the north, east, south, and west. Now, I've been helping write the curriculum for our grade 4 to 6, and I came across something that blew my mind last week because this story has deep connections to the story of Babel. So I'm going to go on a bit of a nerd rant, but follow with me because there's some gold here. So this story takes place at a place that will later be called Bethel, and the story of Babel takes place at a place called Babel, okay? Very interlinked Hebrew words, but follow with me. In our grade 4 to 6, last week we learned about Babel, and then in preschool elementary 2 weeks ago, our kids learned about Babel. Now I have a question, and I'll let you think about it for a moment before I give you the answer. Why did God come and confuse the language at Babel? If you don't know the story, this group comes together, builds this tower into heavens, and then God comes down and confuses their language and scatters them across the earth. Now, have you ever wondered why? Because I always thought it was just about pride. It was like these people came together, they did something so prideful, and God was like, no, I'm going to confuse your language. So he scatters them across the land. But as I was helping and I was reading along with the grade 4 to 6s, there's this incredible thing that the people at Babel say, we want to build a tower so our name will be great and so that we won't be scattered all over the earth. And I thought, that's a weird thing to say. Why is that what's going on? But as you look through Genesis 1 to 11 before the story, there's 3 moments where God says to people, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Be scattered across the earth. Part of God's plan at the story of creation was that his image bearers would scatter to the north, to the south, to the east and west, and fill the world with his likeness. But over and over again in the story of kind of Genesis, people keep gathering and trying to not scatter. And so this promise that God gives Jacob is very interesting because first he says, I'll give your people a land they'll grow in, they'll flourish in, they'll reflect me, and then they'll go out from. The plan was always for God's people to be scattered all across the world, reflecting his image. And that one was incredible. And the one last kind of interesting connection between Babel and Bethel. Babel means gateway to God or gateway to the heavenly realm. And so what the people of Babel are trying to do is basically make a tower through which they can pierce heaven and go into heaven and take the power of the gods for themselves. And they're trying to make this gateway to God on their own strength. But then Jacob wakes up and he realizes God is here. And he says, this place is Bethel, the house of God, the gateway to heaven. So while as humans are trying to do this on their own strength, God has already done it. He's already come down here. I'm sorry if that was too far off. But so that's the second promise. And then the third one, a simple, beautiful reminder. God will always be with him. I will always be with you until this is accomplished. God's presence is following Jacob wherever he goes. And so he gives these promises that were both given to his forefathers, but also to him. And he wakes up from this dream with this assurance. God is here. He is not far off. And he has a plan for me. This lying, cheating swindler is restored in this relationship with God. And I love those words. Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. It's important that we don't just moralize the Old Testament, but when there's moments like this, maybe it hands us an invitation to say, have you woken up? Have you looked around creation and saw God's fingerprints? Do you know that God is here? And maybe you're wrestling with how you do that, and I would say an invitation is to look backwards. Look at your own life. Where have your prayers been where God has showed up in surprising ways? What ways has God been at work and you weren't even aware of it? So our first invitation to this dream is to wake up and embrace it, to celebrate and rejoice that God is here. So we know the man, a man completely undeserving of this vision. We know the dream, a promise of great blessings. And I would also say this part, I forgot to say this. Jacob is promised to be blessed, to bless the world. Jacob receives blessing on the way to others. Jacob is restored so that he can bring about restoration of all. And so there's this wonderful gift that when you and I begin to follow Christ, when we experience that blessing, it's a gift for us, yes, period, but it's also a gift to move past us, through us, to be a blessing to others. So finally, let's look at Jesus, because the Anglicans have been putting these texts together for so long. Why this gospel reading? Our gospel reading gives us this incredible new way to look at the story of Jacob's staircase. In the gospel reading, Jesus is going out calling his disciples, and a man named Philip has been called by Jesus, and he goes to his friend, his close confidant, Nathanael, and he says, we found the one that Moses spoke about, the one who the prophets wrote about. Jesus of Nazareth, the Son of God, or the son of Joseph. And Nathanael responds so well, can anything good come from Nazareth? Like, if we heard that, he'd be like, can anything good come from some other place, Ontario, or something like that? And it's this response, like, that's such a backwater town, like, can anything really good come from there? And Philip's response is wonderful. He just says, come and see. Come and see, which to me is this encouragement. Maybe that's how easy faith is to share. Has God been working in your life? I don't know. Come and see. Is God at church? I don't know. Come and see. Come and see what's going on. Just a wonderful invitation. But then Nathanael comes. Jesus sees Nathanael coming, and he says, here's an incredible Israelite, a man of true faith. And Nathanael's like, how do you know me? And then Jesus gives the most cryptic words we have in all the gospel. I saw you while you were under the fig tree. And no commentator knows what happened. It's just this incredible moment. He says, no, like, I saw you under the fig tree. But there is a little clue, because Jesus says, you will see greater things than that. Which is, you will see greater things than knowing that I saw you under the fig tree. Did he have this divine moment? Was there some sort of staircase moment for Nathanael? We don't know. But Jesus knows, and Nathanael knows, and it creates this moment of awe in Nathanael. Surely you are the Son of God. And so Jesus takes this moment and he says, you will see greater things than this. You will see heaven open and angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And this is a direct reference back to Jacob's dream, in which on this staircase, angels of God are ascending and descending. And I preached this at camp this summer, and I said, so, in Jacob's story, angels are descending, and then in this story, Jesus says angels will ascend and descend on him. What does that mean? And this one kid put up his hand so fast, and I was like, what do you think it means? He goes, Jesus is a staircase. And I wanted to give him a master's degree in theology immediately, because it took me being 31 to see this incredible connection. But that's exactly what the biblical writers and what Jesus is saying. He is the staircase that Jacob saw. On him, the word of God is carried. Angels ascend and descend on Christ, the very word of God. And so when Jacob saw this dream thousands of years before, without knowing it, Christ was there as the staircase. What this means is heaven and earth overlap on Christ. If we want to see God, if we want to see heaven, we look to Jesus. Because that is where heaven and earth come together. Jesus is the place where the restoration of all creation starts and it ends. A staircase between heaven and earth. To encounter Jesus is to encounter heaven. I love that. Jesus is the staircase. And so there's another invitation that we're left with. Like Jacob, can we wake up and say, surely Christ was the staircase. Surely Christ is the place where heaven and earth are reconciled. And I wasn't even aware of it. I love that. And there's one last implication that has for you and I. In Christian faith, we believe that when we invite Christ into us, he comes and lives in our hearts. Paul puts it well in Romans. He says this, then Christ will make his home in your hearts as you trust in him. Your roots will grow down into God's love and keep you strong. With this way of thinking, it means something incredible. In you and I is a staircase between heaven and earth. If Christ lives in us, we become walking staircases where heaven and earth meet, where the people around us can encounter Jesus, which means they can encounter God's presence through us. We are blessed, and we are called to be that blessing to all of creation. We bring God's surprising goodness wherever we go. And to me, that's been an invitation to remember God's goodness, but it's also been an invitation to be that for people around us. To not try to shy away from carrying the news of Christ with us, the staircase living inside us, going from heaven